The desert wind moved like a living thing across the abandoned edges of Falcon Ridge Air Base, dragging sand against metal fences and rattling the warning signs that surrounded the most restricted structure on the installation. Hangar 12, a windowless, blackened steel giant that sat apart from the other buildings as if even the base itself wanted nothing to do with it. And on the night, everything changed. Senior Airman Daniel Reeves and Staff Sergeant Omar Velasquez were assigned to perimeter security, a shift usually so quiet it felt like punishment, because nothing ever happened near Hangar 12. Officially, it didn't even exist. Unofficially, it was where classified materials were stored after foreign technology recovery operations. Words that sounded harmless until you realized they were never explained further. And Reeves had learned quickly that asking questions at Falcon Ridge was the fastest way to get reassigned to somewhere colder, darker, or permanently silent. The night. Air was unusually still when the first anomaly occurred. The motion sensors lining the hangar's outer fence flickered simultaneously at 2:13 hours, not triggered one by one like an Animal Crossing, but all at once, like something had simply appeared inside the perimeter rather than crossed into it, and Velasquez cursed under his breath as the alert tone chirped softly on his handheld monitor. Probably another glitch, he muttered, though his voice carried a tension that contradicted his words. Because the system around Hangar 12 had been upgraded twice in 6 months and never glitched, not once, and Reeves adjusted the strap of his rifle as they approached the secondary gate, the security lights above them humming faintly before dimming for half a second, long enough for the darkness to feel thick and intentional. And when the lights steadied again, both men stopped walking, because the massive hangar doors, sealed shut since before Reeves had been transferred to the base, were slightly open, not wide, just enough to form a vertical slit of darkness that looked less like an entryway and more like a wound carved into metal. Protocol demanded they call it in immediately, but Velasquez hesitated, his thumb hovering over the radio button, as if some instinct deeper than training told him silence was safer. Maintenance. Reeves offered weakly, though he already knew maintenance crews were never scheduled at night and never without armed escort. And the older guard shook his head slowly, whispering, "No one opens Hangar 12 without a colonel present." And, as if summoned by the sound of their own fear, something moved inside the narrow opening, not stepping forward, not stepping back, but shifting sideways in a way that made Reeves' brain struggle to assign it a shape, because it looked almost human, yet wrong in proportion, taller than any man he had seen, its shoulders too narrow, its limbs elongated, and it did not sway like a person adjusting balance, but glided in subtle increments, like frames missing from a film reel. Reeves felt his breath shorten as the desert seemed to fall silent around them. No wind, no distant hum of aircraft generators, just an oppressive stillness that pressed against his ears. And then Velasquez finally spoke into the radio, his voice tight. "Control, this is Bravo 2. We have an unauthorized opening at Hangar 12. Possible breach." But the response that came back was not from Central Command, and not in any voice either of them recognized. It was layered, distorted, overlapping tones speaking in something that sounded almost like English but twisted, syllables reversed or delayed by half a second, and then went dead entirely. The screen on Velasquez's handheld flickering to black. Both men stared at it before slowly raising their eyes back toward the hangar entrance, where the figure now stood fully visible within the narrow gap. And it was not a trick of shadow, not a person in a suit, not anything Reeves could rationalize, because its surface seemed to absorb light rather than reflect it, matte and depthless, as though carved from a hole in reality. And where its face should have been there was no detail, just a subtle distortion like heat rising from asphalt. And Reeves felt a pressure build behind his eyes, accompanied by a faint ringing that intensified with every second he maintained eye contact. "Don't look at it," Velasquez whispered urgently, though he too could not seem to break his gaze. And then the hangar lights inside flickered on briefly, illuminating something behind the figure. Rows of equipment, metallic structures arranged in a circular pattern, cables suspended from the ceiling leading to a central object that resembled neither aircraft nor drone, but something organic, curved and asymmetrical, as if grown rather than built. And just as quickly as the lights appeared, they vanished again, plunging the interior back into darkness, while the figure remained perfectly outlined against it. And without warning, it stepped forward, not walking but compressing the distance between itself and the guards in a movement so smooth and instantaneous that Reeves' stomach lurched as if he had fallen from height. And suddenly it was standing just inside the fence line, impossibly having crossed the locked gate without opening it, its presence causing the nearby floodlights to dim in a ripple effect outward from where it stood. Velasquez raised his rifle, but his hands trembled violently, and before he could issue a command, the figure tilted its head. Almost curious gesture, and Reeves felt a surge of images invade his mind. Bright desert skies split open by streaking fire, military personnel running across tarmac, a craft descending silently through storm clouds, and inside it shapes watching humanity with detached interest, and he staggered back, dropping to one knee as the mental barrage intensified, the ringing now a deafening roar. Velasquez shouted something, but Reeves could no longer hear him, because his vision tunneled and he saw, instead, a different scene entirely. The same hangar years earlier, men in hazmat suits unloading a twisted metallic structure from a transport convoy under heavy guard, officers arguing in hushed tones about containment and communication, about how it had not crashed but landed deliberately, and how what they had found inside was not dead. And then the vision shifted again to show the figure standing before him not as an intruder, but as something returning, something that belonged to Hangar 12, more than the guards did. And abruptly the images ceased, replaced by suffocating silence, as Reeves found himself lying flat on the gravel outside the fence, his ears ringing faintly, while Velasquez stood frozen a few feet away, staring at nothing because the figure was gone. The hangar doors now completely sealed as though they had never opened at all. Emergency sirens began wailing across Falcon Ridge, red lights flashing from the main administrative building, and armored vehicles sped toward them in a convoy so rapid it was clear command had been watching the entire time, though they had not responded to the radio call. And as medics lifted Reeves onto a stretcher, he saw Velasquez being restrained by two security officers while shouting. It was inside our heads, it showed us, but his words were drowned out by orders barked through megaphones and the grinding of tires on sand. And before Reeves lost consciousness again, he noticed something final and deeply unsettling. The motion sensors on the fence were all green, showing no breach, no anomaly, no sign that anything had ever entered or exited the restricted perimeter, as if the event had occurred outside the understanding of the systems designed to detect it. And in the days that followed both, guards were separated, interrogated repeatedly by officials who never gave their names, shown blank footage from security cameras that displayed nothing but two men standing alone in front of a closed hangar for 15 minutes before collapsing simultaneously, and Reeves began to doubt his own memory until subtle details refused to fade. The feeling of pressure behind his eyes, the layered voice on the radio, and most of all the sense that the figure had not been hostile but observational, studying them the way a scientist observes lab animals. And 1 week later Velasquez vanished from base housing without official record transfer or discharge, his belongings removed overnight, his existence quietly erased from duty logs, leaving Reeves as the sole remaining witness to what happened at Hangar 12, though even he started receiving warnings disguised as medical evaluations. Suggestions that stress can create shared hallucinations, that isolation breeds imagination, but late each night as he lay awake in his barracks room, he felt that same faint ringing return, barely audible yet persistent. And sometimes in the reflection of his darkened window, he thought he could see a tall, narrow silhouette standing just behind him, motionless, patient, waiting, as if Hangar 12 had not been breached that night but awakened, and whatever resided within it had marked him not as a threat, but as a point of contact.